This is my life with albinism.
Now, this is my life with albinism.
And this is my life with albinism.
All right, so we are back with another episode of Life with Albinism. We have a special guest with us today. We'll let him introduce himself, but first, we're going to go to our newer co-host, Maya Warren, and let her introduce herself first.
Hey guys, I'm so glad to be here with you, Dale and Adam. I am a YouTuber, I am a podcaster, digital creative. I wear a lot of hats, I do a lot of things, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Okay, and Adam, go ahead and introduce yourself to the people. Give them your social medias and tell them a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Adam Gift Zulu. I live in southern region of Zambia. Yeah, so I'm not really much on social media, but well, I try as much as I can. We'll say with on Instagram, I'd say with Facebook. Yeah, just like that.
Okay. So now, Adam, so you currently live in Africa?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, okay. So let's just go ahead and kickstart into that. What is it like to be a person with albinism living in Africa? I know that that's an extremely hot climate. So what's that like?
Well, I would say it's like you're a righteous person, you go to hell, and then you're trying to survive that temperature. But it's really hard to survive, especially when you don't have the cream or skin products that help you to maintain the average temperature that you're supposed to have on your body, of course.
Okay. Okay. And so is it easy to find sunscreen where you live?
Well, it is if you are closer with organizations, but if you are not and not socializing, it's really very hard. I can't say it's easy because if you have no communication, then it would be rare for someone to just give you that cream because no one else would know.
Okay. Okay. Now what about you, Maya? Is it would you say that it's fairly easy to find the right kind of sunscreen for you
I
wherever you
mean, I used to complain like, oh, I can't find the right sunscreen, but in comparison to that, I think here in America, we have it pretty readily accessible. Like I could go to the Dollar Tree and get sunscreen. It might not be the right sunscreen, but it's sunscreen.
Right.
But it took me a couple years and with the help of one of my a dermatologist to find the right sunscreen, but I eventually found it.
So now I've that's been an issue of mine too. Like you said, Maya, finding sunscreen is super easy, but finding the right kind has been a difficult task for me because for me, I want a high SPF. So it's pretty easy to find like SPF 50, SPF 30, but I typically look for SPF 100 or better, and that's pretty hard to come across sometimes.
The highest I've seen in the store is SPF 100, and it's made by Neutrogena, and it's like very sheer, so it doesn't stink, it doesn't stick to you, it goes on really nicely. Um, right now I'm just using 70, but I usually use either the 70 or the 100. And it took a while finding those because they're not as common. Like you can find 15, 30, 45, all the other
Right.
numbers except for the higher SPFs.
Right, right. So now, Adam, I did want to ask you a question. So I noticed that you've dyed your hair black. Tell us about that. What made you choose to do that? And like, why did you choose to do that? And what inspired you to want to dye your hair?
Well, I've always thought of a darker color for my head because I think our skin is too light. So with me, I don't think the regular color goes well with me. I always preferred brown or black or something that tones a bit darker.
Hmm. Okay, I see. I see. Now I noticed. Now I don't know, maybe if I'm tripping or not, but I know you stated that you live in Africa, but it seems like you're wearing winter clothes.
No, it's not always hot. I mean, at times the night it gets cold. Yeah, so you would want to wear a jersey just to keep yourself warm.
Okay, because you look like you in New York right now. You got the the beanie on, you got the jacket and everything. So it to me it looks like you're in a cold climate right now.
No, it's actually a bit windy outside, and I was just keeping myself busy, so it was kind of cold. I forgot to take it off, so it's just stuck with me.
Okay. Okay. So now I want to ask you guys a question. And that question is, what do you guys feel are some of the basics about albinism? Let's just say someone comes to you and they say, "Hey, I know nothing about albinism. Can you tell me what the basics of albinism is?" What would you guys' answers be? I guess we'll start with you, Adam.
Well, if someone asked me about the basics of albinism, I would say first, well, eyesight is something that's really hard to maintain. Sometimes you might need spectacles, sometimes you might not. All depends with the type of albinism you have. And then in most cases, your skin, you have to make sure that the sun doesn't actually hit so much of your skin. There is a proneness to cancer. There's also proneness to the skin being damaged. Well, I would also advise them to actually know the type of peers they would hang around with, because not everyone is actually friendly to people with albinism. Because some have different thoughts, understanding, and beliefs, especially here in Africa.
Okay. What about you, Maya?
Yeah, I've gotten this question quite a bit being an advocate. So I try to make myself approachable when it comes to albinism, just because I feel like knowing someone with albinism is better than Googling about it, because there's still a lot of misinformation on Google about it. And
Right.
so when people approach me, I'm like, yeah, it's a condition where an individual lacks pigmentation in their eyes, hair, and skin if they have ocular cutaneous albinism. And then I explain there are different types of albinism, and that the main thing I try to drive home is that people who have albinism are human beings and individuals. So a lot of times I'll get, oh, my cousin got what you got. Um, and so I'm like, yeah, she may have what I have, or he may have what I have, but also recognize that that person is an individual. And like by building a relationship with that person, you can better understand what they're going through.
Yeah, right. I think that's key too, because a big misconception from people who aren't around albinism a lot or doesn't know much about it, the biggest misconception is we're all related or we are all the same. You know, like I'm pretty sure you guys have had it before where you get mistaken to be someone else, or they mistake you for, you know, someone else that they think someone else is related to you just because you guys both have albinism. So that happens a lot. And to answer the question, I would say for someone who knows nothing about albinism, who just wants to get to know the basics of it, I would say the first thing is it is a condition in which you have no melanin or pigmentation in your skin, hair, and eyes, and that it comes with a visual impairment. However, it doesn't mean that everyone with albinism is legally blind. Some people with albinism have good enough vision to drive. They still have a visual impairment, but it doesn't necessarily become a disability for them. And also, I would emphasize the skin. So, without melanin or pigmentation in your skin, you have no protection from the sun's rays, UVA or UVB rays. Thus, you do have to keep your skin protected at all times, especially in hot weather, or even if the weather isn't hot, in very sunny weather, because it's all about how strong the UVA rays of the sun are that day. And you can check those specific things on your phone if you would like to. The UV, I think they would call it the UV number for the day, something along
Yeah, it's
those
like a
lines.
meter. I've seen it on the
Right, it's
weather
like a
app.
meter. Right, exactly. And that's what's really going to tell you, is it a little too dangerous for you to go outside on that particular day or at that particular time. So you want to check the weather, you want to check the UV depiction of that day, and that's going to tell you what you need to know. So I would say those are the basics of albinism that everybody should know.
If I may add something, because I
Mm-hmm.
find that I have to articulate, it should go without saying, but like I have to explain that albinism is congenital, meaning you can only obtain albinism through your parents having the recessive trait and you being born with it. A lot of people think like, I remember being in kindergarten, people didn't want to touch me because they thought I had something going on, and I'm like, no, that's not what this is.
They thought it was
And I
something contagious.
Yeah, and I find a lot of adults that I approach like, is it a disease? Like, no, I don't know where you
Right.
get your information, but I'm here to educate you.
One interesting question, and I ask you guys this too. One interesting question I seen on Facebook was someone said, "Is albinism a disability?" What do you guys say to that question?
I would say it's not really necessarily. I mean, I would say on my part, disability is you are maybe not able to do certain things, but with albinism, I would think maybe the sun is the limit, maybe, maybe eyesight, but in most cases, we can do regular things that a normal person would do.
Right, right. What about you,
Yeah,
Maya?
I actually saw that post. It's from a creator that I follow. Shout out to No Melanin. But I responded, and basically I talked about this a couple of weeks ago with someone. Like, people don't understand that vision impairment or vision is on a spectrum. So I don't believe in any way, shape, or form that albinism in and of itself is a disability. But for people who are visually impaired, to the degree that that vision is impaired, it can be a disability. Like my vision impairment, I'm disabled as a result of that. Whereas I have friends in California with albinism, they can drive, they're fine. It's not a disability. So really,
Right.
and this is why I drive home the importance of recognizing that everybody's different with albinism, because my experience is not going to be like someone else's. And, just because one person with albinism adapts one way doesn't mean all of us do it that way.
Yeah, and I think the way that you answered it is the perfect way, because the question is albinism a disability? That depends on person to person cases. For some people, it is a disability because their vision may be so impaired that they cannot drive or have certain jobs that may require a driver's license or things that require operation of a motor vehicle. So for that particular person, yes, I would consider it a disability because now you're unable to do something that is a part of everyday life. So for me, for example, albinism definitely is a disability for me because my vision is low enough to the point where I cannot drive, I cannot get a driver's license or operate any form of a motor vehicle. So for me, yes, it is a disability, but it's not everyone. For some people, their vision is good enough to drive. I know a person with albinism whose vision without glasses is good enough to drive. Now that is mind blowing to me because
Yeah,
without her glasses, she can still drive. However, she still does have a visual impairment, so her sight is definitely not 20/20, and it's probably not even close to 20/20, but it's good enough to operate a vehicle, which means her vision is at least 20/70. So 20/70 is still bad in terms of comparing it to a normal eyesight of 20/20. However, it's more than sufficient to drive, operate a vehicle, get your license, so on and so forth. So for that person, albinism would not be a disability. But for other people like myself, it definitely is. So what about you, Adam? Are you able to drive?
I've never tried that.
In closing, just give us a summary of how your life has been with albinism, and then we'll close out the show.
I would say it has had its ups and downs. At first, maybe in my younger days, I would find it very hard because no one would want to really make friends because they never understood. Maybe because you are different from them. They are maybe in good shape when you're not able to see like everyone else. You're not able to last that long, maybe in the sun. they would always wonder like, hey, you never stay so long in the sun, never hung out. But when you explain to them, maybe with a few, they would understand, or some would make it a comedy show for them.
Okay.
Well, growing up with it, I think people became more understanding as you teach them what albinism is and what really comes about, what causes it. They become more understanding. Well, with social media, I would say it's a bit tricky. Sometimes people will not understand. Maybe they might be looking to find friendship with a white person, and they'll mistake you because maybe you're pale, maybe the picture reflects in imagination. They would think otherwise.
So let me
So
ask you.
maybe,
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. Please continue.
yeah, so they would be like, hey, are you white? And I'll say no. Maybe it's going to last for the next 3 4 minutes asking you questions. Maybe they'll ask you to see if they would see your parents' pictures, etc. But I mean, there's a no-go area for everyone. I wouldn't send someone a picture of my parents because that would be creepy for me because it's just not normal. I mean, you want to know someone, you would just want to know them.
Oh, listen, I've done that plenty of times. I've had plenty of situations where people would say to me, what does your mom look like? What does your dad look like? And I'll pull out a picture real quick just to show them. Or they'll ask me, are your mom and dad regular colored, or are they like regular black people? Like I would get that kind of question, and I would show pictures all the time. So
Regular
I
black people.
no, say I'm sure you've gotten that question before, Maya.
I have. I've never had anybody phrase it like that. I've had like are you mixed? Are you Puerto Rican? Are you adopted? Are you white? Um, and I always address it the same way, like, no, I'm not.
So they've
And on my
never
social media, and
so
on my
they've never
social media too.
specifically asked you what color are your parents.
I've never
But
gotten like what color are your parents since I was in elementary school. And my parents were actually like in the room when the person asked that.
Okay, but Adam, you've gotten that question a lot, right? What color are your parents?
very, of course, you get tired sometimes answering. You just start to laugh.
But you don't show them pictures when they ask that, do you? Or do you?
Uh, Maybe I would say it's creepy for me. It's not something I would do mostly because uh you might never know whom you're talking to.
Oh, right. No, you're right. You don't want to just be showing personal pictures to a random stranger. So I totally understand that.
And as a woman, like I'm very careful about that type of stuff.
Showing pictures. No, I
Mhm.
understand. I've always done that though. And sometimes it's just people's curiosity. Like, put yourself in the mindset of a person who does not have albinism, who very rarely or is seeing it for the first time. You would ask all these questions too. You would be like, "Hey, what skin color is your parents?" Like I think that would be a normal question if you did not have albinism and very rarely ever seen it. So then it would be you would have a lot of just thinking about it. Having albinism is so different and it's so rare that it would make people naturally inquisitive about what it is and things like that. Like, just think about it. A person who's black with black features, black textured hair, but pale skin and blonde hair, and you don't know what it is and you've never seen it before, that would raise a lot of questions. I think alone just having natural blonde hair would pose a lot of questions. I don't know if you
I
guys have
was
this, but there's actually, and it's far more rare than albinism is, but there's actually I don't want to say a condition, but there are african there are African people who have brown skin or dark skin who are actually born with natural blonde hair. I forgot what it was called. There was a specific name for it, but it was for people who are of African descent with regular complexion that were born with natural blonde hair. Have you guys ever saw that or heard of that?
I've seen like other black folks with right, what's the word, reddish hair, like amber hair, and it's like their
Yeah.
natural hair. And I think a lot of times people assume they have albinism. They're like, oh, they got albinism. I'm like, no, they was just born with that color hair.
Right.
um but I have not seen the specific iteration you're referring to.
Have you ever heard or seen that, Adam?
Yeah, I came across an article just like that maybe a year ago. I came across it, and I forgot the term which you refer to them, but it does happen. I do see people with the same condition.
Yeah, like I forgot what it was called. And it was like it was a very easy it was a very easy name to pronounce too. I totally forgot, but I'll definitely research it and get it down for the next episode. But so yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. So I one thing I always encourage other people with albinism is to not feel offended by being asked questions, even if they're silly questions, they're stupid questions, whatever the case. Try not to feel offended by questions, because what we have is so rare that naturally somebody's going to be inquisitive about it. So I don't
Yeah,
I just go ahead, Maya.
I was gonna say I agree with that. Like I became officially an advocate in 2011 or so. And like I always tell people, like I have zero problems with you asking me questions as long as you're respectful. And I think we all know what respectful looks like. And so like I've had people from pastors to superintendents of school boards ask me questions, and like I get a little bit excited. Maybe that's nerdy. I get excited because it's like, oh, I get a chance to talk about this and educate you.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah, see, I got to jump in right there, because that's exactly how I feel. I don't care if it's an adult, if it's a child, or whoever. When people approach me with albinism questions, even if it's silly questions, I get excited because I'm like, this is my time to educate. And one thing I tell people, and this was a whole thing on Facebook. I posed the question, who feels offended by the term albino? And of course, a lot of people said, no, I don't care. A lot of people said, yes, I find it offensive. And one thing that people continuously kept saying was, oh, I find it that they find it offensive because the person is mistaking their condition or something like that. And I tell people all the time, that's not them. People asking you about albinism or asking you if you're albino isn't their form of trying to offend you. That's your opportunity to educate them. So be excited that somebody is there that you can possibly educate, so that when they come across the next albino, they'll know what it is. They'll know how to identify it. They may even know how to not be offensive when they're posing that question. So take that time to educate that person. So for me, I get excited when people come to me with questions, no matter how silly it is. I get excited because I'm like, this is my time to educate and teach them about albinism. And if they already know, then that's even better. Like, I'll give one example. Like, one time I was at work and I had a kid run up to me, and this is exactly what happened. He ran up to me. He's like, albino, albino, I know what you are. You're albino. And the moment he did that, his mother like ran over to him and was like, you stop that. Don't insult that man like that. You stop that. And I had to butt in and just tell her, like, no, he's not being offensive at all. He's, if anything, this is a good thing. This is showing me how smart he is, because he acknowledges what condition I have, and he knows what it's called, and he knows what it is. This is a good thing. That means he's educated. So I try to tell the parent, like, hey, don't shun him for what he just did or said. He's not being offensive at all. He's showing his knowledge. What do
Yeah.
you guys think of that?
And I will say this, like, I'm gonna just preface the saying this, like everybody who has albinism on a different level of their journey of acceptance. So I used to really hate myself growing up because I was bullied at home, I was bullied in school, and nobody told me what I had. So I hated the word albino because it was used in a derogatory fashion. And it wasn't until I began to do my research and allow my relationship with Christ to formulate my identity that I became comfortable and more solidified in who I was, which enabled me to like, look, you got questions? Okay, here, boom, boom, boom. I can point you to this resource. But that took time. And I've come across people with albinism who are just on different levels. Some people like, I don't want nothing to do with you talking to me. Get out my face. Leave me alone. And you can have the same condition as them, and they like, leave me alone. So like, and I've come across people who are like, yeah, I'm an advocate, and I'm not saying all of us have to be advocates, but I think a good skill to learn as you learn to accept your condition is to kind of understand where those roots of frustration and anger come from. And I had to do the work of understanding that everybody who asks me a question isn't trying to attack me like those people in the past did. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
who says something ignorant, they don't all have negative intentions. Some people just don't know. And I had to do the work of saying, okay, when I respond this way, it's because it took me back to this memory. Well, why am I still holding to this memory? And then deal with the hurt, the bitterness, or whatever it is attached to that. And that sets you free and allows you to accept what God gave you and who He's called you to be. And, there's freedom in that, but everybody's at a different place. And I don't fault people. Where I do like challenge people, push back a little bit, like, hey, um, just recognize that how you respond reflects all of us.
Right, right. Now, what about you, Adam? When people are approaching you with a variety of questions, do you find it offensive, or do you take that top opportunity to educate them? How do you personally take it when people are coming at you with a bunch of questions about your albinism?
Well, the best I do is give them an insight of what albinism is. I first educate them where they don't understand, of course, and where they're getting it all wrong. Well, I used to get offended when I was younger. Maybe I realized that I wasn't accepting myself for who I was. But
Mm,
when I grew up, I felt like this is who I am and I can't change it. So I became more acceptant about it, more open, researched more, and well, here I am.
wow. Well, and one thing that the both of you guys said that I want to home in on really quick is that both of you guys said that majority of you feeling offended by the questions that you were getting about albinism stemmed from not fully accepting the albinism at that moment. And then once you did fully accept your albinism, then the questions wasn't so offensive at that point. And I think that that's such a good thing to home in on, because I think for me, and this is my opinion, we're born with albinism. We can't change it. We can't do nothing about it. It's all that we know. So who cares what question that they have for you, what they say, what they call it, if they call it albinism, if they call it albino, if they call it AB, if they call it golden, whatever the heck they want to call it. What does it
So
matter?
many names.
Say it again.
No, there's so many names.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
there's so many names that they could call it, and there's even offensive names for it or whatever. But my thing is, who cares? Like, this is what we have. This is what we're born with. You gotta embrace it. You know what I mean? And my thing is, if you 100% embrace your albinism, then you don't care if they call it albinism or albino or AB or this or that. Or who cares?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I love having albinism, and I've always have since I was a kid. I've never in my life felt like, oh my God, I wish I didn't have this. I've always, since I was a kid, looked in the mirror and said, wow, this is unique. Wow,
Yeah.
this is different. Like, you know what I mean? And then you get benefits from it since you're a kid. So when I was young and I'm able to walk into the eye doctor and get free glasses, that made me feel good. Like, oh, okay, I pick out whatever glasses I want and it's free. Like, so from a kid, you realize there's a benefit attached to this.
And I
So,
will say, and I will
mhm,
say this, like it really depends on people's upbringing because
yeah,
I I did not have a childhood. I grew up in an abusive home. It was all around bad. So by nature, I couldn't fully appreciate what I had because nobody taught me what I had and nobody appreciated me as a child for what I had. Whereas you had dope parents who really made sure that you knew who you were. And so I find
Yeah.
that you're up, and this is why, like, when people come to me about and ask me about resources for kids with albinism, like, look, I'm gonna give you all the resources, and if I don't know some, I'm gonna find some and get back to you, because it is so important. Like, the ages from 0 to 5 are our most formative years. That's when we learn to see ourselves, not only for how people respond to us, but for how we are told to see ourselves. And I know as adults, we're like, I don't care what nobody thinks, but as a child, you are a sponge. You're retaining all these
Yeah.
messages that are being articulated or, not articulated. So it's very important that parents, regardless of your child having albinism or not, you instill uh the fact that your child is unique and beautiful, they're loved, because those same messages that you feed them ages 0 to 5, they're going to hear those as adults.
Right. Right. So so now, Adam, what about your parents? Ever since you were little, did your parents kind of embrace that albinism and educate you and teach you exactly what it was and built that self-confidence in you? Is that how your parents were?
Yeah, my parents, well, they are very cautious about my albinism. Well, when I was very young, I actually asked them, "Are we white? What? Why is our skin so white?" And then the mom actually took time to teach me, "No, you're not white. You actually have a condition. It's called albinism." Well, when she did that, I was more cautious, but most of the people with the condition, they don't usually enjoy their childhood. I was one of them. I was one of them. My childhood wasn't the best of childhoods because you grew up in an environment that was not friendly in terms of socialness. You had to survive. It's a live or let die situation. But at the end of the day, I had to fight and reach a certain level where I knew that I can handle it. Even
Mm,
without my parents' help, I can handle it.
Yeah,
wow.
that's
Wow.
beautiful that you said that.
Yeah, I think that's a powerful message. So the
Mhm.
last question I have for you, Adam, did you also dye the hair on the top of your head? If so, can you show us?
Yeah, it has died. Yeah, it's the same.
Wow, wow. Okay, okay. So, I want to take this time to thank the both of you. I want to thank you guys for having such an amazing episode. I think we got a lot of good messages out. We got a lot of clear messages out. I want to thank you, Adam, and I also want to thank you, Maya, and thank you all for watching. And for everyone who was watching this for the first time, or if this is the 20th time you've seen Life with Albinism, go ahead and click that subscribe button for us and check out more content. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dale.
Thank you. Thank you.